My daughter and grandson are dead. Forget it. I will never forgive you. My mother's words pierced the air, each syllable an icy dagger. As a child, my mother was distant and cold. I never warmed up to her. When she uttered those words over the phone, my husband's distress was palpable. Maybe you're not lying. I don't mind. Because if you are, you'll be in trouble. Her voice took on a sinister tone, chilling me to the bone. I could almost picture her smirking on the other end of the line. Good. Shall we go then? I think we are the ones who are really in trouble. I managed to respond before she hung up. My name is Lily, a 33-year-old office worker. I met my husband, Keigo, through my grandmother, who attends a tea ceremony class. I wasn't keen on meeting him. He was the grandson of someone from the class. But my grandmother insisted, saying, "Lily, please meet him just once." Reluctantly, I acquiesced. Approaching 30, I knew marriage was inevitable. To my surprise, Keigo and his family were genuinely kind. After a year of dating, I married Keigo. His family, with their prosperous business, was worlds apart from my humble upbringing. My friends and colleagues envied me, calling me spoiled. I was right that you two would get along, my grandmother beamed proudly. Keigo's family included his parents and grandmother, though his brother had passed away. Keigo had never lived alone before marriage, so his domestic skills were lacking. I found myself frustrated with his habits. He'd leave clothes strewn about and dishes unwashed. One day, he casually referred to me as mother. Shocked, I packed my bags and left. At home, I feigned loneliness, masking the truth about my crumbling marriage. When my grandmother inquired about my marital bliss, I forced a smile. "It's okay," I replied, hiding the turmoil within. But deep down, I knew the root of my unease. My mother. She had always been intimidating, casting a shadow over my childhood. With my father busy with work and my grandfather gone, her presence loomed large. My parents' house had always revolved around my grandmother, leaving little room for warmth or connection. When I was young and sought answers from my mother, her response was always the same: "Ask Grandma." It left me feeling like she wasn't interested in me, so I stopped confiding in my parents altogether. Yet my grandmother was different. Intrusive, yes, but she believed that following her advice would lead to happiness. As soon as I graduated from university, I left home. I didn't fully grasp what family meant, but my husband's family seemed harmonious. They always ate together, even if I was famished, waiting for everyone to be ready. My husband once remarked that this tradition persisted even after he moved out. 3 days after returning home from my escape, my grandmother, along with my husband and mother-in-law, appeared in my room. "It's my fault. Let's go home together," my grandmother pleaded. My husband looked remorseful. "I spoiled him too much," he admitted. I was swayed by their apologies. But as explanations unraveled, blame was cast upon me too. My grandmother sighed, pointing out my faults. Even my mother apologized, urging me to reconcile. Feeling abandoned, I left without a word. Silent in the car, my mother-in-law broke the tension. "If housework is too much, let's eat together. I'll cook for you and Keigo." But I couldn't find solace in her gesture. "No, I want Keigo to help with the housework," I asserted. Surprised, my mother-in-law questioned, "Isn't housework the wife's job?" I retorted, "I have a job too. We're not a conventional family. Keigo will inherit the company, but that doesn't make household chores solely my responsibility." Despite my silence, my mother-in-law persisted. Finally, I confessed my pregnancy, despite being told to keep it secret. My husband was thrilled, and I knew, amidst the chaos, a new chapter awaited. My mobility had diminished since my husband was to become a father. I wished he'd be a tad more cooperative with household chores. It's as simple as that. Irritation brewed within me as I hadn't even visited a maternity hospital for examination yet. Unexpectedly, my mother-in-law's demeanor shifted. From complaints to gentle inquiries about my pregnancy, it felt like a flip of a switch. Was this a split personality? Upon returning home, I found the room surprisingly clean. "Did you clean it?" I asked my husband. "I wish you'd have kept the pregnancy a secret." I sighed. He confessed that my mother had been a nuisance, bothered by the impending arrival of our child. "I'm sorry," he said earnestly. His sincerity moved me. Perhaps I should try a bit harder. Eating at my parents' house on weekends sounded appealing. His gentle suggestion left me with no reason to refuse. Despite knowing I should take it easy, I embarked on a challenging pregnancy journey. At the maternity hospital the following week, the doctor's confirmation brought immense joy. I promised to shower our unborn child with love. Eating at my in-laws wasn't as joyful as anticipated. Their happiness about the pregnancy was palpable, especially my father-in-law and grandmother-in-law. "Come on, Lily, eat. You're carrying our precious air," my mother-in-law cooed, masking any hint of sarcasm. I reassured myself that I could manage, but as we sat for dinner the following week, I reached my breaking point. Despite my embarrassment, I mustered the courage to make a request to my mother-in-law. "I'm sorry, mother-in-law." My mother-in-law's smile abruptly faded into a grim expression when I mentioned my morning sickness. Feeling uneasy and unwell, I confessed that I couldn't wait until dinner time to eat due to nausea. However, her response was unexpected. "Morning sickness? Didn't Keigo tell you? We have a rule to eat only when everyone is present. Please be patient," she stated firmly, catching me off guard. Her subsequent attempt at humor, calling the situation totally nasty, only added to my distress, tears welling up in my eyes. That evening, with my father-in-law arriving home late, dinner was delayed until after 8 p.m. Unable to wait, I ate quietly while my mother-in-law was out, feeling ashamed of my own actions. Later, when I returned home, exhausted, my husband chided me for being greedy at my parents' house. My attempt to explain my morning sickness fell on deaf ears. "Well, I'm a man, so I don't understand," he concluded dismissively. Overwhelmed with anger and speechless, I ceased visiting my in-laws. Instead, I feigned illness to avoid facing the discomfort and humiliation again. Each day, grappling with the weight of morning sickness, I longed for relief while cherishing the growing life within me. Despite my father-in-law and grandmother-in-law's gentle reminders to take it easy, my mother-in-law's relentless insistence on my presence became a source of stress. Her incessant calls only worsened the situation, leaving me with a pounding headache. In the midst of my discomfort, I couldn't help but wonder why Keigo was the only one visiting my parents' house. The pressure from my mother-in-law weighed heavily on me, pushing me further into isolation. "I have severe morning sickness," I sighed, hoping for some understanding. "Ha, again? I guess that means you're feeling good," my mother-in-law quipped, her tone light. Feeling dismissed, I retorted, "Yes, even though I look sick, no one sympathizes with me. Just because you didn't have morning sickness doesn't mean everyone else is fine." Apologizing for the bad signal, she hung up. Frustrated, I packed my things and returned to my parents' house, entering the second half of my pregnancy. When I mentioned to my husband about wanting to stay home early, he casually brushed it off. Despite frequent calls and messages, I ignored them, feeling overwhelmed. Even my grandmother, usually gentle, expressed her displeasure, refusing to offer assistance. Despite the strained relationship with my in-laws, one silver lining was more time with my mother. Confiding in her, I revealed the tension with Keigo and his mother. Keigo's indifference towards household chores and occasional outbursts left me scared and isolated. When I approached my mother-in-law, she urged me to be patient, even after I showed her a bruise from one of Keigo's outbursts. Now, contemplating divorce after the baby's birth, my mother listened in silence, her expression stern. "Yes, I understand," she finally replied. With just one word, I responded to the chaos unfolding around me. Eventually, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When labor pains struck, I reached out to my husband, but his cold response left me feeling faint. "I can't go, I'm busy with work. Just let me know when you're discharged," he said, indifferent to the impending arrival of our child. His callousness fueled my anger, so when the day of discharge arrived, I chose not to inform him, and strangely, he didn't reach out either. As I made my way back to my parents' house, my phone rang. It was Keigo, demanding to know why I hadn't returned home yet. His voice, filled with frustration, echoed through the room. Silent shock engulfed me when my mother uttered her unforgivable words. "My daughter and grandson are dead. Forget it, and I will never forgive you." It was outrageous. Then, a voice, unfamiliar yet somehow familiar, spoke nearby. It was Keigo's mother. Accusations flew, and my body trembled with disgust. My mother intervened, suggesting we involve the police to address the abuse I had endured. With a firm hand, she ended the call and enveloped me in a tight embrace, offering the comfort I desperately needed. It was the first time my mother had hugged me in such a way, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief knowing she was by my side. As I watched my son sleeping peacefully with my mother, my grandmother returned, her footsteps echoing loudly. "What the hell? You're still alive," she exclaimed, her frustration evident. A call from Keigo's mother had stirred her ire, and now she demanded an apology. Reluctantly, we accompanied her back to the in-laws' house. But upon arrival, Tension hung thick in the air. My mother-in-law and husband greeted us with cold stares. "Oh, isn't he our cute heir?" my mother-in-law cooed, reaching for my son, but I recoiled involuntarily. "Don't touch me," I snapped, surprising myself. An argument erupted when my husband dismissed my concerns about divorce. His fear was palpable, faced with the possibility of separation. My mother-in-law's accusations only added fuel to the fire. "You should apologize. The police are exaggerating," my husband insisted, but I stood my ground. Amidst the chaos, my mother's silence spoke volumes. "Which one is crazy?" she challenged, glaring at my grandmother. Suddenly, a commotion from outside interrupted the confrontation. Keigo's grandmother arrived, her presence commanding attention. With cold eyes, she admonished her daughter and grandson for their behavior. In that moment, realization dawned. Keigo's obsession with the family business had blinded him to my struggles. His grandmother's words struck a chord, prompting apologies from both my husband and mother-in-law. As the tension eased, Keigo's grandmother turned to me. "Lily, I'll make sure you take responsibility." "I'm sorry," she said, offering a glimmer of hope for reconciliation. "I hadn't realized it, but you're considering breaking up with Keigo. However, I'd be delighted if you visited me again. Thank you for your assistance," the grandmother-in-law expressed sincerely. Glancing at my awkward grandmother, she continued, "You were insistent, so I arranged a matchmaking between our grandchildren. Lily and her mother were lovely people, but what about you?" My grandmother blushed furiously, clearly uncomfortable. As my husband and mother-in-law sat in stunned silence, I bowed deeply to my grandmother-in-law and took my leave from their house. Upon returning home and packing our belongings, my grandmother confronted us. "Where do you think you're going?" "I won't allow you to do as you please," she asserted, echoing my mother-in-law's words. "Your mother-in-law insists that you cannot divorce her son until you, Lily, have had a child. I've had enough." Later, my mother revealed that my father had been involved with another woman, for which my grandmother blamed her. When my mother demanded a divorce, my father refused to allow me to leave with her. My mother regretfully admitted that she should have fled with me to spare me from suffering. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Eventually, both my mother and I divorced our respective partners. My father initially resisted, but evidence of his affair forced him to comply. Learning of his betrayal shattered my perception of him, and I vowed never to see him again. My mother also sought compensation from my grandmother for the distress she caused. Keigo's family faced consequences too. They were ousted from their former position of influence due to embezzlement allegations. It turned out that Keigo's grandmother, now the company's chairwoman, had uncovered their wrongdoing. When faced with the ultimatum between family and company, Keigo chose the latter without hesitation. His tearful reunion with his mother bore no forgiveness, as they both faced accusations of criminal activity before disappearing. Despite the turmoil, life improved after our divorces. My mother and I rented a small room and began living together, finding solace in each other's company. I named my son, "I Am You," a testament to our newfound independence. My mother flourished on her own, rediscovering her passions and hobbies. Colleagues noticed her increased happiness, and even at my part-time job, I found myself smiling more. Through living together, I learned more about my mother, her talents, preferences, and dislikes. Grateful for everything she had done for us, I thanked her sincerely. Moving forward, I vowed to embrace the future alongside my precious family, strengthened by the bond between my mother, my son, and me.